is I'm going to mute everybody here in just a few minutes, but just to kind of make sure what we are recording this. Okay, so if there's somebody that either needs to drop out early or that doesn't find the material to be what they were looking for, it's very fine to stop if you want to, or if you want to come back later on, we'll give you a link to do that. So. Just want to make it aware. In just a second here, I'll go ahead and mute everybody except for the speaker, so that we don't have somebody jumping, back and forth in, so that we hear that. So we're going to do that. Patricia, she's with our San Antonio Valley Historical Association. She's going to be monitoring chat. So if you do want to pull up chat, and you could add a question, and we can ask those questions later. We'll have some Q&A at the end if there's anything that that we need to cover from there. And so basically, I'm going to turn off. I don't know if you can see it here, but I'm going to turn this off here real quick. Here, I'll escape this and quit sharing it for a second here. So if I go into, let's see, I'll go into Spotlight. So I don't know, that may show that it may show me up more, but I just wanted to show these books, and we'll talk about that in a second, but actually we have some of our authors on here, and here's the San Antonio Valley. This is the book that we're basically going to be doing a similar book with, and that will be what we're going to be doing as part of this. So what we're going to do is first we're going to start out with a little background on each one of us, and then we'll kind of talk about some other things. We'll show you some pictures that we're going to use and the chapters that we're going to use, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to start out, and then I'll pass it probably on to Karen, and then we'll have Howard here is in the background here. He'll come up to the camera, and then he'll do it. So this is totally informal. We're learning, so if there's a problem, if one of us, or if our internets go down, just stay tuned, and hopefully we can all come back in, but hopefully that won't happen. So anything else from Karen? Is there anything else you should cover? She's muted, so we won't know that. All right. Okay. So just to give you a little information, I'm John Jernigan. I was born here in King City, and irony would have it, I was born on this block. My business, which we recently sold, was on this block, and the house I live in now is on this block. So I have the unique thing that I've lived on this block, and I worked on this block, and I was born on this block. So kind of a unique history for me. About 10 years ago, I earnestly started collecting photographs. And one of the things I learned in the very beginning was I went to a guy named Pat Hathaway. Unfortunately, he just recently passed away. He's from Monterey. And I went to Pat Hathaway because he had some images of King City that I was interested in getting. And so I contacted him, and I met with him in Monterey, and I bought some images from him, pictures. And so in the conversation, he said, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, I want to get some pictures of downtown King City. I really like old history. And so Pat says, well, you need to collect postcards. And I says, postcards? Why would I want to collect postcards? I'm looking for pictures. And he said, because most of the historical pictures of your area, or any area pretty much in the United States, is in postcards. And so there's one particular postcard that is the most sought after, shall we say, it's called an RPPC, Real Picture Postcard. And from the turn of the century up into, say, the 40s, postcards in most cases were actually a real photograph. Kodak made a camera that the negative was virtually the same size as the postcard, and so it was a very, very good picture. And so those were really great. So that's what Pat got me started on, collecting postcards, and you can see some of them in the back. Fortunately, King City had a lot of postcards, and so not only that, but collecting images, and so that's the great thing. So that also got us involved in with the library and getting getting a microfilm reader. San Antonio Valley and the Friends of the Library helped to raise funds, and we got a new microfilm reader, which benefited our community, and especially our partner here. Howard, was a very active user of that, so he'll tell you about that in just a minute. Also, there's another gentleman that was kind of influential, a guy named Michael Seamus. He's from Hanford, California. Probably has one of the premier collections of photographs. And Karen and I met with him a few years ago and learned some of his techniques and looking for photographs and what have you. So he's been a real inspiration in my time also. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if Sue maybe on the thing here, but this is the book that she helped create, and Sue Raycraft and Ann Beckett, and that's of the San Antonio Valley. Great read if you're looking for it. And then of course we have May Clovis with the McCarlin did the Salinas Valley book, those are great assets to our community. And what will happen is that the King City book will be just one more, part of that puzzle, so that we can tell the history of our area. Because, if people are coming through and they want to pick up something, that's an easy read, it works really well. There's about 200 photographs in each book, and it works very nicely for somebody that wants just to pick it up. Earlier, Arcadia had contacted us. Karen and I in 2020 about doing a book, and at that point we were selling our business and still in business, and we said no, but we would be interested when we sold our business. So that is what brings us today. And so we said call back in September. They did. We signed up with them, and Howard Strohn graciously joined us, and I think we have a very strong team. So Karen, would you give us a little background on you?
Sure. One of the things that interested us about the Arcadia books is that all of them are pretty much exactly the same. They're 128 pages and approximately 200 photographs. And John was looking at his wall of all these photographs, and we were thinking, what are we going to do with all these photographs? And so that's why we started exploring Arcadia's it's called Images of America series. So I came to King City in 1977, and I had studied journalism at Shasta College and in Reading and at CSU at Fresno. And Harry Casey called and offered me an internship as when I had graduated from college. And I took the job because I like small towns and I liked rural areas, and it was a chance to kind of get started. And I was going to stay for the summer, and that was 44 years ago. So it ended up being longer than a summer, but it's been an opportunity to learn and to love an area. So when I came, I replaced a lady named Edith Winslow, who had been the reporter, the society editor here for many, many years. And she had died earlier that year, and that's how I ended up getting the position here. One of my assignments was to write a column called Looking Back, and that was a chance to go in the back of the Rustler office were these big books of old copies of the newspaper going back to 1901. And so I would go back and look what happened 25 years ago, 50 years ago, 75 years ago, and then write a little something about it and put it in the newspaper. So that kind of gave me an introduction to the history of King City, not to mention the fact that when you work for a newspaper, you have to know the names of streets, and you have to know the people that are there, and you have to know how to get around, and you're involved with the news. So it was a good introduction to the town. Then John and I got busy raising a family, and we were working, and so our main interest in history then involved some spring tours that we took with the San Antonio Valley Historical Association. And so we're fortunate today to have some of the board of directors of that organization with us. Paul Getzelman is the president. Patricia Woodfield is the vice president. Maria Weinrith is the secretary. And then Bart Bartosh from Parkfield and Mary Rogers from Paso Robles and Carol Kenyon's with us also. And so they are on that board, and over the years they've done tours of the area, and we often took our children with us, and those have been great opportunities to learn about the San Antonio Valley and about all of Southern Monterey County. The other thing that the San Antonio Valley Historical Association did about 40 years ago was they made a concentrated effort to do some oral histories of the area. And originally they were on cassette tape, and then they got converted to CDs. And John and I were making a lot of trips to Sacramento. I have family there, and it's about a 4-hour drive. And so we started listening to those oral histories, and we're absolutely fascinated by the things that we learned from the firsthand accounts of people answering questions about what life was like in Southern Monterey County. So because of that, we realized that there are a lot of people around now who have a lot of information, and they won't be around forever. So we thought, well, maybe we should be doing some more of these oral histories. So John and I started doing that one by one, and there's so many people that we'd like to learn from and have interviews of. We'd like to have more people doing interviews. That's what the Historical Association did 40 years ago, and I'm really grateful to them for that treasury of information about our area. The other thing, because I'm a newspaper person, I was always fascinated by the old copies of the Rustler, and there are issues that go back to 1901, and that's when Fred Vivian came to town and started that paper. It was Harry Casey's grandfather. And so I was around working for the Rustler when Harry arranged to have all those hard copies of the newspaper put onto microfilm. And I did not realize at the time what an incredible thing that was, because there really are very few places that, especially small towns, that have their newspapers on microfilm, and microfilm lasts a long time. And Harry had bought a scanner that was at the King City Library, and when we started looking into it more seriously, we realized that the scanner was kind of out of date. And so we helped with a fundraising campaign to get a brand new microfilm scanner, like the kind that they have up at the California History Room at the State Library in Sacramento. So we were able to then be able to read all those newspapers. And every time, the problem is, and Howard will tell you this, if you're interested in history and you start reading newspapers, you can spend a whole lot of time doing that. And so it's an interesting thing. And then we had a little bit of leftover money, and we were able to start digitizing that to the California Digital Newspaper Collection. So now people can access some issues of the Rustler from 1901 to 1936 from their home in their own computer. So often I do that, and it can consume a lot of time, but boy, you learn an awful lot about the history of your town. So it was when we were going to the library and working on the microfilm scanner that we met Howard, or I met him. John got reacquainted, and we realized that this gentleman knew an incredible amount of information about our town because he had spent so much time reading these old newspapers. So we want Howard to tell you a little bit about himself and why we feel privileged to be able to work with him on this book.
I'm Howard Strohn, and I'm working with Karen and John Jernigan on this book project. A little bit about me. I was born in King City at Doc Andrus's hospital, which is now Benson Plumbing. And I was raised in San Bernardino on the San Bernardino Rancho, where my dad was the foreman for 48 years. I went to San Bernardino Grammar School, graduated from King City High School, and I always had an interest in history, even when I was young. So as time went by, I got more interested. I'd tear things out of the newspaper, out of magazines, and toss into a box. Then I started reading the microfilm of the Rustler, probably back in the late 1980s, when the library was still over in City Hall. And I've read every Rustler from day one through the mid 1940s. I've also read a lot of the microfilm of the Salinas papers and the microfilm of the Monterey papers, because at that time I was specializing on South County, the old District 4, which ran from roughly about Sweetwater to the county line. And as far as I knew, nobody had been done any serious research about that. So I thought it was time somebody to do it. Now, looking more into King City, I've come back and I've reread the Rustlers from day one up to about 1930. So I've got binder after binder on my shelves at home that have copies of the Rustlers and items that interest me, which are highlighted. So I can just anytime go and pull them off the shelf and look up and see what I want. And I guess people say, why did you do this? And I get my response always is, well, as far as I know, nobody else was doing it. So somebody should be doing it, try to preserve the history. And the things I do remember as I was growing up in this area. And I've been involved in a lot of historical groups. I was on the board with SAVA for quite a while. The Nacetone group in Lockwood, I was on their board. I was president of the Friends of the Historic San Antonio Mission for 14 years. And when I moved to Big Sur for 20 years, while I got involved in the Big Sur Historical Society, I was the program chairman, chairman of the board, and then became the president. And I helped I didn't lead it, but I helped organize the archive room. Fortunately, the Post Ranch Inn, we cut a deal with them and they gave us a cinder block building for our archive room. And the lady she lives in Big Sur, but she worked for the Railroad Museum in Sacramento for the state. So she was well versed on how to set up an archive room. So with her help, to me, we got, for a small group like the Big Sur Historical Society, we got a very good archive room and it's well organized. So then asked what my favorite photo for the book project. Why, it's the old sports blacksmith shop.
Howard, can you just wait 1 second and
Oh,
I can put it up for you if you'd like.
Yeah, great.
Or do you want to do yours first, babe?
Well, which one is the next in line?
Okay, all right. I think yours is the next. Let me see what you're next in line there. Okay, let me get that one up. Let me share the screen here, and we'll be right up here. So let's do this and share. All right, there you go, babe.
Oh, great. Okay, so Howard, we'll come back to your picture after I talk about this one.
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite pictures that we have come across in our search for old photos. And just as kind of a background, John and Howard and I are planning to spend most of 2021 going through and selecting pictures and then matching them to captions that mostly Howard is writing with information from all his research. And so we're hoping that by the end of the year, we'll have the book put together and be able to have it come out in the middle of 2022 for publication. But this photo right here, when I saw this, it just made me smile because this is a picture of the Catholic Church when it was moving in 1951 from its home at the corner of Russ and Bassett. There's a phone company building there now. It's across the street from the mortuary. But that's where the Catholic Church used to be. And Charles King, when he laid out the town, gave 3 lots to the different churches, and the Catholic Church got that lot. But then they outgrew it, and so they had a chance to move to property on North 3rd Street. And in those days, what we've learned from our research is that it was pretty common to just pick up a building and move it somewhere else. So here you have the church building and the other associated building being towed down the street. This is at Vanderhurst and Broadway. Turning north on Vanderhurst, you can see the Safeway building in the background. That is where El Filete de Oro is right now. And they're passing the corner where our library is. There was a Richfield station there. And I think my favorite thing about this photo is the man riding on the crest of the church as they're going down the road. That probably would not meet the OSHA rules right now, but back then you just did what you had to do to move something. So I just think this is a great photo, and we're looking forward to having this in our book. So Howard, do you want to talk about the smart blacksmith shop photo that you found?
Okay. Yeah, it was kind of interesting, the connection that took place to come up with a photo. I was doing nothing about King City, but actually researching Long Valley. And I was on the computer, on the internet, and I found a connection of a lady that lived in Reno, and her family, grandparents were early settlers in Long Valley. So we started communicating back and forth. And then they intermarried into other families there. There was more than one Smith family, but it was one of the Smith families. And every so many years, they come to Long Valley just to tour where the properties were and to go to the cemetery that's still in Long Valley. And at the end of that year in October, they were planning a trip. They invited me to come along, which of course I thought was wonderful, so I can learn a lot more history. So as I'm talking to the lady, why, she says, you know, my grandmother was born in King City, and her father had a blacksmith shop in King City. So, oh, really? And so his name was Nis Andersen Svorts from Denmark. And as it turns out, why, where the grandmother was born is what we refer to as the Wilma Rose House, because that was the property that her parents first bought. They bought the lot on Broadway where they, what's the rest of the grocery now? El Pueblo.
El Pueblo, yes.
It'd be the east half of the El Pueblo, that location where blacksmith shop was, and directly behind was their house. So that's where his daughter was born. So he, no doubt, was the first blacksmith in King City, and he didn't stay that long, but to me, it's a wonderful photograph. It's got a picture of the Jim Saloon on the right, and eventually on the left, while the Burgess and Garcia Saloon, which is operated by Charlie Howell, and later become known as the Auto Resort. Back then, they didn't call them saloons. We went to the resort. But anyway, to me, this photo is just wonderful to have a picture of the first blacksmith shop in King City.
Thank you, Howard. That's great. So this is one of my favorite photos. And I mean, to be quite honest with you, the last photo you get is always your favorite photo. But this photo, the reason that I always kind of like this photo, first of all, it's taken from the first street at Broadway. Many photos were taken from there. The El Camino Hotel, which is on the right, was photographed many times during its long career, where it was remodeled at least 3 or 4 times. What makes this significant to me is that my parents, when they came to King City, were passing through, and they stopped at this little restaurant that is on the right. It's called Rudy's, and my mom and dad were in there having lunch, and their car was parked out in front, and a gentleman came in and said, "Who painted that car?" And my dad said, "I did." And he said, "I need a body and fender man just down the street." And so he ended up getting a job in King City in 1948. But what makes it especially significant too is just minutes before he walked in, my mother had spoken to my father and said, I would never want to live in a town like this. And my dad said, why? She said, because there's too many bars and there's too many gas stations. And so my mom obviously did not get her wish, because she's now buried at the end of town down in the cemetery with my dad. And they obviously made this their home, and it was very successful. The other thing that makes me, that I really like about this photograph is on top of the El Camino Hotel, you can see kind of an octagonal shaped building. I never did know what that was until we spoke with a couple old timers. And that was a aircraft spotting station during World War II. And what that was that they manned it 24 hours a day. And there were people up there spotting airplanes to obviously keeping lookout for enemy airplanes. And so, so very interesting stories about that little building up there. And I never knew what that was until somebody told me. So anyway, I love this photograph, and you know, it's one of the many that we have in our, Karen and I have in our collection.
So many people drove through that on the 101, the old 101, and stopped at Kiefer's, had their pink bean soup.
Right.
Yeah, those are just my 2 comments.
Thanks.
Adlai Stevenson came to King City when my father was mayor, and they met at the Del Rey Airport.
Really?
Yeah, he was running for president back against what, Eisenhower or somebody.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Stevenson, yeah.
So what year would that have been?
Pardon?
What year would that have been?
Well, Eisenhower took over after Truman, so it would have been probably the early 50s,
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
maybe mid 50s.
Well, that's where the Rustler pretty well covered all those events. So it is kind of one, I think we will try to touch on some famous people that have come through King City over the years.
And, you know,
Eisenhower was elected Leonard in 1948.
okay. And the governor flew down and landed at the airport at Hunter Liggett. And that would have been in 48, David,
Yeah.
remember?
Yeah, that I don't remember.
Yeah,
That could have even been part of the dedication of the mission. That was about when they had the,
yeah, I think that's what it was.
right.
I believe it was 1949, and they called it the Return of the Bells. And there was some display windows that were done in downtown King City about it also. And it had something to do with returning some of the bells that were originally at San Antonio Mission.
Ah,
49, yeah. Mhm.
Mm.
yeah.
Also, Keepers was Sook's Tavern, SUK''S.
Wow.
Now we actually have a couple pictures of that.
That's interesting.
So Nancy, do you have a question? You want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I wanted to know about if you were going to cover any of the school systems. You know, as I was married to Jim Force, and his grandfather was county superintendent of schools. If some of you people want to look at your high school diplomas, you might see his signature on your diploma at one time because he signed them. I had somebody call me one time and want to know if the Jim Force I was married to was the Jim Force who'd signed his high school, you know, graduation certificate. But, you know, he went down through Lockwood, Big Sur. Every year they took a pack train, a mule pack train, to visit all of these schools and the way far out, you know, way once a year. And at one time I saw pictures of these, but I don't know where they ever went to. So are you going to do anything on the schools and how they were important to the growth of the community and what was going on?
Well, I mean, you know, to semi-answer your question, Nancy, you know, we're definitely obviously going to have pictures of the schools. Yes. Okay. Now, each picture is allowed about 75 words underneath it, the cut line, and about 18,000 words total. I think maybe Karen touched on that. So we really don't have a lot of verbiage. You know, it's the book is designed as a more of a shall we say, history light kind of book. Fortunately, we have Howard that has really given us some levity to those to those cut lines because he really knows a lot of detail, and he's really giving us a lot of detail that a normal book probably wouldn't even have. So we're very fortunate there, but I doubt that we're going to get quite out into that area. It's going to be more kind of, focused here. But that's great. Have you ever read the book about the gal that from the library? That's a great read. And I think she talks about force in there.
Yeah,
I think Karen showed it to me one time when I was over there. Yeah, letters he used to write, the teachers evidently.
yeah, Nancy, you brought up a couple of interesting points, that there are pictures that people had at one time that might be in a suitcase or in an attic, or they might have gotten thrown away. But sometimes somebody preserved those pictures, and then you can go back and try to tell the story based on other information that is available. So we hope people will keep their eyes open, and if people are interested in specific parts of history, there really is a need to have people take a specific topic and research it. John and I and Howard can only do so much, but everybody's got a little piece of the history of King City, which is why it's interesting to listen to people and to hear the stories, and then to try to put it together into a comprehensive history. It's just going to be one snapshot based on what we've researched, but we hope other people will take an interest in different topics.
Karen, David again. Would you like the King City High School yearbooks from 52 to 57? The original yearbooks? They're full of pictures of King City.
Correct. Now, here's the problem, David. Arcadia, and this is part of the area where I'm working, is Arcadia has a very specific requirement for their scans and stuff for their photos, okay? And unfortunately, photos out of books do not scan well, okay? You can't de-screen them and what have you, but because it's printed, it doesn't work very well in the transfer to another book. And that, because there are some great pictures in those books.
Okay.
I had the experience, I know that requirement, because many of our photos were rejected and they had to be rescanned by Arcadia. I had to actually send the originals. They rejected the scans that had been done. But I had the experience when I was selecting the photo for the cover that they rejected our copy, and just by some miracle, I found that the Huntington Library had the same photo and a much higher quality print of it. Negative, they actually had the negative. So that might be someplace, the Huntington Library in San Marino, they have a huge collection of California, and they had the Dutton. So there might be some other things, because people went out and took these historic pictures like of the Dutton, and then they ended up there. So that might be a resource you might want to just check in on.
Good, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Well, you can always contact us by email or give us a phone call. We really appreciate you hanging in there with us with this technical problems. We actually kind of wanted to try this because we'd like to be able to make it work in the future, and it looks like we did. We were successful for about 20 minutes, and then we have to figure out what happened and try to prevent that from happening again. But thank you so much to all of you for taking an interest in this, and please tell people about what we're doing. If you know of somebody who might have some old pictures, or be able to share something with us, send them our way. And we look forward to kind of adding to the history of the area. So
Can I make a comment, Karen? This is Suzanne. A comment in that, thank you very much, John and Karen, being, close to you and in and out of your house a lot. I see the amount of time and energy and expense that you've incurred in trying to recreate, or not recreate, but, bring forward the history of the. And you also have extra projects too, like the auditorium at the high school, and that has got an amazing history. And you've got, so much regarding just that project. But for those of you who have not ever seen it, John has also done a video where he shows old buildings in King City and current pictures of that building. And then split screen where you can see half and half. And it's amazing to see the metamorphosis of every building in town. So thank you very much.
Is that on YouTube, John, that video?
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, and
John and Karen, we do have another question from Melissa Jernigan, who wants to know if you will be doing another Zoom meeting with updates.
Yes, I think we want to do one maybe around June or so to let people know how it's going. And by then we may have some specific pictures that we're really looking for, or we may need some information. So I think maybe mid-year, and we'll kind of do an update on it.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Yeah, fine.
John?
I have one more thing to say that when we lost the meeting, all the people that entered their email addresses in the chat, we lost that. So if you would like more information from John and Karen, you would put your email addresses in the chat room. We'll make sure that you get updates on the book. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. John, Karen, can I jump in?
Sure.
Okay. I'd just like to invite, this is such a wonderful project that you're doing, and it's exactly what I've tried to encourage the San Antonio Valley Historical Association to bring to our group, so that under our auspices, and maybe even we could help you monetarily, but bring these type of projects to us, and we'd love to help you with them. And especially with John and Karen now building up the knowledge that they have with publishing and with the Zoom thing, I think we'll be able to help people going forward to approach these types of historical projects. And I just would like to encourage people to bring them to the board or one of the board members, and we'll look at them all. So thank you very much for doing this, guys.
You talking about the spring
Yeah,
tour?
thank you.
Oh,
Karen and John, maybe you would want to, while we have all these wonderful people all together, tell them about our Sava Zoom meeting.
yes. In fact, we had a slide. I don't know, is it sitting right there? We are planning a spring tour, and we had a slide to show you of that, of the Indians Ranch, which was supposed to be our spring tour this year, or last year, but it got canceled. So we're excited about that. We have Len Tavernetti signed up to talk about his book, and we'll be sending out information. It's going to be on Saturday, May the 22nd, if you want to mark your calendars for that. And then his friends, Tom Pettit and his brother, David Tavernetti, who spent time up there, as well as the U.S. Forest Service and the representatives of the Ensenales family of the Salinan tribe. And so I think it's going to be a great Zoom talk. We'd love to be out there in person, but rather than wait until the world makes everything perfect, we're just going to go ahead with the Zoom meeting, and we'll be sending that in the newsletter and publicizing that. So
Thank
anyway,
you, Karen.
I think that's it. And please feel free to reach out to us if you have any other comments or questions, and we'll try to fix our technology.
Yeah.
Not sure what happened, but
Something happened, but we can't figure it out yet.
that's how. Okay.
Karen,
Yes.
Thank you much.
at the very beginning, you showed that book on the history of San Antonio and another one.
Mhm.
Where do we get those?
Well, they are available at Soul Treasures. They're available at McCarlem or down at San Lorenzo Park at the Monterey
Oh, okay.
Wildlife Museum. I don't believe the gift store is open right now, but
The mission.
the mission has them. You can also order them, I think, on Amazon.com.
Correct. Yeah.
And yeah, so they're really very interesting if you like this area. So,
Yeah.
okay. Well,
Thank you.
thank all of you.
That was
Thank you.
great.
Thanks for being patient.
Thanks for being
Yeah.
persistent, getting back.
Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful.
Great job.
Yeah.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy birthday, John.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey.
Hey, happy birthdays.